I feel like I want to hand the intro over to you.
No. This is your show. You do the intro.
Hello and welcome to Find Your Inner Flavor. I am one of your hosts, Becky Schoenig. I'm partner, Gregory Owens. We are the co-owners in SymBowl. We're located in St. Charles, Chesterfield, and in Kirkwood, Missouri. We're a healthy lifestyle-focused restaurant, and through the last 6 years, we have learned that the more you empower yourself and educate as to where food comes from, how you treat your bodies with that food, it empowers you more and more to make the right decisions for yourself. We want to thank our sponsor, Nationwide Processing. So if you've been to any of the concerts out there where they have the ATM machines,
festivals or smaller locations that are cash only, they almost always have an ATM machine.
And Nationwide Processing brings value to the small business owner by using cash, because if you use that credit card or that debit card, there is always a fee that comes out of that business owner's profits and pocket. So by using cash, you put 100% of the profit into the business owner's hands, and we want to thank Nationwide Processing for supporting the small business owner just like that. Because of them, they allow us to educate you and Find Your Inner Flavor into your home and empower yourself. So our guest today, Dr. Olivia with Wellness Connections, a backstory.
Which is where?
In O'Fallon, Missouri.
Okay.
O'Fallon, Missouri. Yeah.
So Olivia and your partners, because there's two couples.
Yes.
Who are all of them?
So myself, my husband, and another couple, Doctors Jason and Whitney Hammond. So we're the original co-founders. 12 years in, we still see patients at that location. We've opened up 9 other locations throughout the United States.
Oh my gosh.
With that said, only our O'Fallon location has functional medicine services.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I want to say it was the first year or two that you opened.
Yep.
My family was in a car accident.
Yep.
We all came in to see you for several months. And so our relationship, we met originally.
And this would be what, 10 years ago?
Like 11.
I want to say it was like 11 years ago.
Well, that's right, when we opened. So during that time, I was by myself doing functional medicine. So we now have brought in more doctors. So you know the original, we joke around the Fab Four. So you know the original docs, we're still best friends, raising our kids together, but we've added providers. So we have a licensed acupuncturist, and she's also a certified functional medicine practitioner, and we do have another doctor helping with the physical medicine side.
And in the time frame, you've also created your own supplement line.
Yes.
And all of these other resources to help people.
Absolutely. So originally I was creating, I was just helping patients figure out what foods to eat and not to eat, but there were not all these blog sites, and YouTube wasn't, and Facebook wasn't what it is now. So I had to create menus, shopping lists, recipes, do's and don'ts guide. So I started creating all of this, and it turned into a paper cookbook that I would print at Kinko's, and patients would just pay for the print cost, which was 10 or 15 bucks. So that's now evolved into a full-blown cookbook.
Right.
And I created Cooking with Dr. Olivia probably 6 years ago. My baby was 1 year old at the time. I was like, gosh, I'm constantly creating these recipes, these menus, these shopping lists, and I can only be with one patient at a time. So I was trying to create resources that people could pull from the internet. And I think that there's a lot of bloggers out there and entrepreneurs and stay-at-home moms that have done it 100 times better than me, because essentially at the end of the day, I am still a doctor in practice.
Yeah.
I'm still a healthcare provider. I'm not in the business of technology and podcasts and blogging, but I did the best I could with the resources that I had, and it's gotten me this far.
Yeah,
so.
And what we've been learning and discovering, I would like to say, so we rebranded from the Hot Pot to SymBowl a year and a half ago.
No, almost 2 now.
Almost 2 years ago. And one of the things that we reined in on was food is medicine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we had been doing it and kind of...
We never owned that. We never owned it.
Yeah,
we didn't really
it was
even
kind
know
of just what we did.
Right.
Quality sourcing, correct portioning. Really trying to advocate for variety of nutrient source. But we never really, we actually avoided the word healthy or diet or any of that sort of nomenclature.
Real quickly, give us the know-how, or give us a little bit of background. Why don't doctors use food? what makes it different between a functional medicine doctor and a regular MD?
Great question. So you have to be a healthcare provider in order to go through the advanced functional medicine training. Now, you can get trained in clinical nutrition and food as a dietitian or a nutritionist or what have you, but to be a certified functional medicine practitioner, you have to have a background in healthcare before you can even start that process.
Okay.
So just because my doctorate is in chiropractic, it didn't predispose me to that much more nutrition education than a medical doctor.
Okay.
So for example, nutrition has been my passion since I was a teenager because I was sick and food was making me sick, and I didn't know food was making me sick. And my mom tried hard to find out what foods were making me as sick as I was, but every doctor she took me to kept saying, it's not diet, it's not diet. Diet has nothing to do with the function of your digestive system. And I remember doctors saying this to me and my mom. Now, my mom was raised in Poland, and she kept saying, that doesn't make any sense. How can what my daughter is eating not affect her digestive system? So we just kept searching and searching and searching, and I met a functional medicine practitioner who was also a chiropractor. Now, I thought I was going to be an oncologist because I watched my mom fight and kick cancer's butt 5 times in 15 years. So I wanted to grow up and help people like my mom. I was so inquisitive about science and research, so I knew I was going to go into healthcare. And when I went into undergrad, I was studying biology and biochemistry. And really, that's all food is. That's all vitamins are. Biology and biochemistry. So I didn't have an advantage in going to chiropractic school other than chiropractors have 2 more nutrition hours than a medical doctor. That's not that impressive. 4 hours versus 2 hours. But think about it. Your cardiologist who studies cardiovascular disease, your endocrinologist who studies diabetes and thyroid disease has an average of 2 hours of nutrition training. That's it. So what we have to do, because what we're taught in this 8 years is to diagnose and to treat. And you run the testing that gives you your diagnosis so you can appropriately prescribe your treatment. That's our healthcare system. Has nothing to do with food as medicine. And it's going to be a long time before we improve the curriculum in healthcare institutions.
Well, don't you also feel and believe that if you're treating food as medicine, that's not a quick, easy fix?
You know what? It's not. But also, the doctors are thinking, that's not my job. My job isn't to study food. My job is to study physical diagnosis and pathology so I can give you the right diagnosis and put you in touch with the appropriate treatment. And I, on the side, am hired by a nutrition company to train physicians how to implement nutrition into their practices. And I get that a lot from physicians where they say, that's not what I went to school to do. I have, OB-GYNs who call me and ask me questions about hormones. And I say, I'm not really sure. How do you not know this? And they say, because that's not, and it's a humble conversation.
Right.
They're calling me to ask me a legitimate question. And my response to it, their response to it is, that's not my job. My job is to diagnose and treat, not understand the function and balance of the hormone system. And I'm like, wow, how can you go to college for 8 years or 10 years or 12 years and not understand how the hormone system functions?
I guess for me, I've always akin it to, having a house. Our body is the body is a temple, whatever. And doctors take the house as it is and, okay, this wall is leaning too far. Well, then here, I'll prop it up or I'll pull it this way.
Right.
Instead of going and saying, okay, why?
Why? You're right.
Because,
why?
If the house is, well, then obviously the foundation or they're settling in the ground or there's something underlying, but that's not their job. They weren't the one that designed it.
Right.
They weren't the one that built it. They're just there to say, okay, there's the problem. Let's fix it.
Exactly.
Not how, or even so far as to say, okay, well then going forward, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again?
Sure.
There's just a here now fix.
Absolutely.
Not the longevity.
Not the big picture is what we've done is we've created specialties of every type, right? Like your primary care 15 and 20 years ago was your doctor for everything. And now it's no. Now you need a cardiologist for this, a gastro for this, an endocrinologist. What we've done is we've divided the body into pieces, but that's not how the body works. And understand every functional medicine practitioner out there, everyone, I don't care if they're a vet, a dentist, a medical doctor, a cardiologist, everyone has to go get training in functional medicine after you finish up all your doctor training. So it costs time and it costs money. And we're here in St. Louis, where we've got a functional medicine community that's about 50 practitioners. Now, for the city the size of St. Louis, that's pathetic, where if you go to areas like California, Vermont, New Mexico, Arizona, functional medicine practitioners are a dime a dozen. Insurance is reimbursing naturopathic doctors in those countries, in those states. Here in Missouri, a naturopath can't even get a license. We don't even license naturopathic doctors in the state of Missouri. So
are you saying, okay, because I'm questioning or wondering, are there a lot of them claiming to be functional medicine doctors but don't have all of the training and knowledge? Because if it's not being licensed, if it's not being regulated, what stops a regular chiropractor from saying, I am a functional medicine doctor?
So there's two big governing boards right now. One is called IFM and one is called A4M. They're probably the biggest ones that regulate the education and the certification for functional medicine practitioners. Now, with that said, there are other ones. So for me, I have a diplomate in clinical nutrition from the American Institute of Integrative Medicine. So there are governing boards, right? And is it really being regulated to where somebody
it's going to come in and say,
you have to realize it's so new.
Yeah.
It's so new that there's not a lot of legality to it yet, other than you should be a licensed healthcare provider, you should have malpractice, and I wouldn't claim I do something that I don't know much about.
So I guess, there's sort of the old saying is what do you call the top of the graduating class from medical school, and what do you call the bottom of the class? Well, they're both called doctor.
Right.
So how does someone who is looking to get a functional medicine practitioner, how do they say, well, honestly, this person's a kook, this person's legit. Sure. How do we navigate?
They all come out over $200,000.
Right. They all spent 8 years and 200.
So
right? You didn't. You know what? And let's give them the respect and the courtesy that they deserve. Right? These people are people who went to college for 8+ years and did commit $200,000-$300,000 to their education. I am not minimizing that. I'm not. What I will say is that's where things like this come in, right? Where you see people on YouTube and podcasts, and people, you build trust with people before, but you build trust with people by speaking the truth, by putting information out there, and then people find you. Well, I didn't seek to study Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's found me, right? I love hormones. I've worked with thyroid and hormones for 14 years. And Hashimoto's found me. I had a choice. I had to learn more about it, or I had to tell my patients, I don't know what Hashimoto's is, but I think we've got to be humble enough in healthcare to say, I don't know.
Right.
Because to just make up lies, blatant lies that people are told, how is that legal? How is that legal?
And I think in the restaurant and the food side of things, that's what we're learning and discovering, and that's part of why Find Your Inner Flavor is there. It's to help better educate.
Yeah.
Because you see the marketing terms out there all the time. Natural, organic, made from scratch.
Non-GMO.
Non-GMO. Yeah. All of this terminology that makes the person who just trusts those terms.
Right.
And that's what they're looking for on a label.
Sure.
And then they're saying, oh, this must be good for you. In our next episode, we're actually going to debunk some of those because we've pulled some products in.
Discuss.
Then we're gonna talk about the labeling and the branding and how, but then when you go to look at the ingredients, what the real thing is.
Well, but I think the thing is, in your industry, and we see it because your customers are our customers, there is a lot of unknown, and there is in the normal, or not normal, the traditional medical system, especially with big insurance gets involved, government regulations get involved. How does someone know? You said like Hashimoto's. I mean, they're going to Google that maybe after they get the spelling remotely correct. And they're going to start searching for someone to help them. And I would imagine if you did that, a lot of people would pop up. How do they gravitate to someone who really can fulfill? You said trust, which is huge, but trust takes time.
Yeah, it does.
One, we've mentioned Hashimoto's a couple times.
It's not a car.
Can you explain? Can you explain what Hashimoto's is? Because there's this whole thing called autoimmune protocol, but then there's one piece in there that's this Hashimoto's.
Sure.
What specifically is Hashimoto's, and why is it different than? Why is it kind of separated from?
So it's not separated from autoimmune disease. It is an autoimmune disease. So just some basic stats on Hashimoto's. First of all, it's not the tooth fairy. It's a real disease. It's a real diagnosis.
Okay.
Right.
And, in 14 years of being in practice, I remember when fibromyalgia was a fake diagnosis.
I was going to say that.
I remember when I was a teenager, irritable bowel syndrome wasn't a real diagnosis.
If they don't know what to diagnose you with, you've got fibromyalgia.
Right. Or it's considered experimental, or it's in your head.
Yeah.
That's what IBS was, right? 20 years ago, it was in somebody's head. Fibromyalgia, 15 years ago, was in somebody's head. Guys, this is not the tooth fairy. What you do is you test antibodies. You test TPO, thyroid peroxidase, and antithyroglobulin. If those
just spoke all kinds of things.
That's how you test.
Can we have an index for this episode?
Yeah, we might need a subtitle.
So you don't test thyroid hormones for Hashimoto's. You test thyroid antibodies. So Hashimoto's is not a thyroid disease. It's an autoimmune disease that attacks the thyroid. Rheumatoid arthritis is not arthritis. It's when your own immune system attacks your joints. Autoimmune disease is its own category. And so Hashimoto's is the most prevalent, the most common autoimmune disease in the United States, not in the world, in the U.S. And understand, our statistics in the U.S. for autoimmune disease are very different than the rest of the world. So Hashimoto's is the most common autoimmune disease. It's estimated 26% of Americans have it. So what you have is you have these antibodies. And what are they doing? They're attacking your thyroid. And what that does is it gives you thyroid symptoms. Why? Because your thyroid is being destroyed. Just like anything. You could drink and destroy your liver, but it's going to take a long time to break it.
I'm going to destroy my liver one more time. Cheers, everybody.
So... And I say over time, right? Having a drink or a couple's not going to destroy your liver. And same thing, having elevated thyroid antibodies, the larger your antibodies, the longer your thyroid antibodies are elevated, it attacks the thyroid, and eventually your thyroid will fail. But you can have thyroid symptoms with normal thyroid hormone tests because your thyroid tests won't come back abnormal until the thyroid has been attacked enough.
Right. Almost past the point of no return.
Exactly. So, like diabetes, right? It's like diabetes. It's cumulative. It's not something that just shows up, but you can have symptoms for a long, long time before you ever get your diagnosis or your testing comes back abnormal.
I guess for me, it's something that I've struggled with because I was a culinary teacher. I did teach the culinary nutrition course, which probably is about the damn same some of these medicine doctors get. I have a really basic understanding, and I know just simply from teaching it, I would say probably 95% of the public has no freaking clue how their body works.
I would agree.
It may be higher than that. They have no. So I understood what you just said, but how do your patients, have they done enough research on their own by the time they get to you that they understand how that's working and why something like just testing a thyroid that is still healthy isn't the same as testing for the antibodies that are actually attacking it. Because those are, you're like, tests. Here's the Death Star up here.
Right.
Oh, we can see the Death Star, but unless we count up all the, Luke Skywalker next, we don't know it's going to blow up.
Yeah. So I think people have sought out this education, and I put this education out there.
Okay.
Live seminars, Facebook Live, YouTube, what have you. But So people are searching because they don't feel good, because their thyroid testing is coming back normal and they know something's
but still
wrong.
Something's not right.
Or better yet, they got a hypothyroid diagnosis. They took their Synthroid or levothyroxine. It put their thyroid hormones in the normal range, but they still have symptoms. They're still constipated. They still have brain fog. They still can't lose weight. They're still depressed. They're still losing their hair, losing their eyebrows, cold all the time, goiters and lumps in their thyroid. They still have the symptoms.
Sexy.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why, so when how you were explaining earlier your practice and how it evolved based off of so many of the patients coming in and asking you for more information and more knowledge, you dove into studying it and learning more and more. That's kind of how SymBowl has moved into the autoimmune protocol.
Right.
First customer that, some of our first customers was paleo. How can we create things that are paleo? And so we geared it in that direction. Then all of a sudden, autoimmune started popping up in the last couple of years, really big for us.
Right.
And that's where Greg kind of started gearing and switching his gears over into this autoimmune protocol.
Sure.
It's a whole other monster. And a lot of people are starting out with this paleo concept. Identifying symptoms are not going away. And then they have to go into what's the next phase, and autoimmune typically winds up becoming. So explain, what are you eliminating? Because we've always been told fruits and vegetables, no matter what, are good for you. But not the case when it comes to autoimmune.
Right. So here's what I find is when you're putting all your eggs in the basket of diet, of autoimmune paleo, you do have to be more restrictive. Versus if you're doing some functional testing, I don't want to say it gives you room for error, but it gives you more information. For example, not everybody with autoimmune disease has leaky gut. So leaky gut is a real thing. Again, I remember when it wasn't a real diagnosis. Well, guess what it is now? How do you know when somebody has leaky gut? You test for something called zonulin, and you test zonulin on a stool analysis. IFM, which is out there educating physicians, is putting on a whole summit of what do all autoimmune diseases have in common. A big factor is zonulin. Okay, so now we're going to talk diet. Gliadin, which is another protein found in wheat. So wheat has two proteins, gluten and gliadin. We know gliadin breaks down the mucosal membrane in the gut, elevating zonulin, essentially creating leaky gut. So what I'm saying is if you do have Hashimoto's, just eating paleo is a very good first step.
Right.
Just going, you have to be gluten-free with autoimmune disease. You don't have to be gluten-free with every disease or every thyroid disease. You have to be gluten-free with autoimmune disease. Because what that gliadin does is it goes in and it's wearing down your gut. Well, 70% of your immune cells are in your gut. So you've got to be gluten-free when you have any autoimmune disease, not just Hashimoto's.
Okay. And are you finding that so on the norm, can you also have autoimmune issues and Hashimoto's or whatever else, but not have severe symptoms when you're eating these foods? So can somebody like myself, I don't notice a lot of issues out there when I eat. I've recently, as I've become more conscious of my eating, if I intake too much gluten, I feel bloated, head fog, all of these other things. But I'm not having any major consequences. So is a major consequence the issue, or are there people out there that are not aware and conscious of the small consequences and still suffering and dealing with it?
Yeah, I do. I totally understand what you're saying.
Because I don't know if I understand what I just said.
So here's how I would put that in perspective. What are the symptoms of cancer? What are the symptoms of heart disease? The first symptom of heart disease is typically a heart attack. So you can walk around feeling fine or saying this food doesn't affect me and then get a horrible diagnosis or have a heart attack and drop dead. So how we measure how healthy we are is looking for nutrient deficiencies and also measuring inflammatory markers, right? Like you right now could have high C-reactive protein, which is inflammation attacking your heart. You right now could have high homocysteine, which is inflammation attacking your blood vessels in your brain, and you could feel fine. You could eat gluten and not feel any different than when you don't eat gluten. So what it comes down to is we can't base our health on how we feel. When food sensitivities are not anaphylactic, life-threatening food allergies, right? Like if you are anaphylactic to gluten, like many people are to peanuts and shellfish, You would know it.
Yeah.
You would know it. But what we have to understand is gluten's inflammatory in everybody. And when you have an autoimmune disease, you have chronic inflammation. So gluten's not the cause, right? It's not the cause, but it's certainly fueling that fire, right? It's making your inflammation worse. Another thing is once you have one autoimmune disease, guess what? You're at a higher risk for others. So having Hashimoto's automatically predisposes you. Yeah. So having Hashimoto's puts you at a higher risk for celiac. It's just a statistical fact. Once you have one autoimmune disease, you are more prone to others. So you want to be preventive and proactive. Bless you.
I mean, it's like getting a cut, and okay, you have a cut.
Yeah.
Well, then all of a sudden you've opened up that pathway to infection.
Sure.
You staph, and what I've always found, so a couple things about myself. First, mental illness and diabetic. So, and it's very interesting because these things sometimes creep up on you so slowly.
Right.
That your norm or what you expect and your feeling, like you said, you can't on how you feel is because it's not, you said like the anaphylactic, you're allergic to peanuts or shellfish. It's such a extreme reaction that of course you notice it. I'm feeling a little bloated or I'm not feeling 100% good when I eat, a loaf of bread. Mm-hmm. That isn't like that. It's this really slow and, maybe 10 years ago, you didn't even notice it. And then by the time it really is an issue, you're so accustomed to the feeling. You don't even know that you're feeling bad. You don't even know that, like for me, before I had to get pretty elevated in my blood sugar before I realized, oh, wow, I really do feel shitty.
Right. And I think that's most people are walking around so inflamed
they don't know.
That they feel, you don't know until you know.
This is normal.
So when you feel good, you're like, oh my God, how did I ever live like that?
Couldn't even remember.
Or when you have no inflammation and you eat gluten and you have to take a nap, you're like, I used to walk around like this all the time. And it's not just gluten that's the bad guy, right? There are other foods out there. I'm not throwing gluten under the bus. I'm just saying if there was one food I can say you had to cut if you have any autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's is what we're talking about. It's got to be gluten. I'm sorry. That's not me. That's the bad guy. You can blame your parents for that one because you have to be genetically programmed for autoimmune disease.
So has this been around for a long time or is this just all of a sudden popping up?
Hashimoto's?
Hashimoto's, autoimmune, anything like this?
No.
Because
all this stuff's
it's been around for a long time. autoimmune is on the rise.
So why is it on the rise? Is it just being diagnosed and people saying, I'm not feeling right and finding the right resources?
No. On the rise?
No, it's not. And it's easy for us as doctors to say, it's because our diagnostic techniques are getting better. No, they're not. No, they're not. Our diagnostic testing is getting better. Like the same testing you did for Hashimoto's today is the testing you did 30 years ago.
But could you have done it 50 years ago?
Well, I know that there's research dating back to the 70s on Hashimoto's, right? So what I can tell you is what's happening is the amount of toxins we are being exposed to that we allow in our food system, in our air. These are not toxins that were there in the quantities they are now 20 and 30 years ago. We all sit there, my grandparents ate gluten. Yeah, but they weren't eating glyphosate.
I was going to say.
They might have been eating gluten, but they were eating glyphosate, which goes in, kills the good bacteria. Then you get a bad bug overgrowth,
and grandma was making bread in the kitchen.
Exactly.
I mean, you'd be walking home from school and you'd smell the bread that was being baked in the oven.
Yeah, they were. They weren't eating mass produced, with tons of preservatives,
and they weren't eating gluten breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snack, and they weren't eating
in everything.
And you have to understand the gluten that you eat in France or in Italy is not the same gluten you eat here. Because these are countries that have consciously chosen to ban many of these ingredients that we allow. Mm-hmm. They've chosen to ban them. And as a result of that, they do have different rates of these diseases that are so prevalent in America.
Well, and they don't eat it to the extreme either.
They don't.
We find gluten in, if you go, and we'll talk about this at some point, but pretty much every sauce, if it's in a box, it has gluten. Pretty much
gluten, sugar,
gluten, soy, modified, proteins. It has everywhere. And that's the thing, that it's the quick, easy.
And one of the things that we're starting to do is identify, and it's taken us 6 years, but we're starting to identify that SymBowl is kind of like that mediator, and we're creating alliances more and more with the functional medicine doctors out there, because we're the ones seeing their clients coming in to our restaurant and seeing exactly where they're struggling and what they maybe aren't saying in the offices. Right. So how important is it to the average person out there to have something like a SymBowl, or to know where their resources when it comes to food is safe? Because you're not following them around, showing them labels.
Yeah, you're not holding hands.
You're not holding hands.
Right. That's where we, as patients ourselves or advocates for our own health, have to take responsibility and educate ourselves. Just because everybody else is doing it doesn't make it okay. Right? Like, at some point, I have to take responsibility for my own health. Just because it's allowed in the food system doesn't make it safe, right? You have to realize, is in healthcare or in food, everything's so disconnected. You've got government, regulating certain things in the food industry, and then you have insurance companies, and then you have healthcare providers. Well, you don't. They're separate businesses. They're separate entities.
Then overarching, you have massive food companies,
right?
Massive marketing companies.
It's right.
And then food distribution companies, grocery stores.
Yes.
It's a monster.
That false advertising or marketing is allowed. Why is it allowed? Because it's a business. It's an industry. But you know what? Me as the consumer, it's up to myself to educate myself. And my doctor doesn't choose what goes in my mouth. I do, right? So I seek out like-minded people, like-minded healthcare practitioners. I'm not throwing any of my doctors under the bus. I have the best doctors for myself and for my family, of all different specialties, OBs, dentists, family practice physicians, because I found somebody whose philosophy matched mine. If I wanted a pill, there's plenty of doctors that could give me one, right? Well, but I chose to align myself with doctors where they're not going to give me a pill unless they know it's something that me or my family really needs.
And it's interesting. I'm gonna share just a short little backstory on myself. When I was in my 20s, I was diagnosed with depression, bipolar. And finally, if you've been in that mental health arena, you know how difficult it is to even just get an appointment and to go see somebody. Right. And the quick thing that they do is they diagnose you and they give you a prescription. It was after the third prescription that was not working for me, and requesting to go off of them. They wanted to put me back onto the first original one that worked the most, but I gained 20 pounds in
which is common,
2 months.
Right?
I started keeping track on a calendar and identifying that it was very hormonally driven. So the bipolar was a quick diagnosis because my mood swings would be so high and low, but it was really the hormone aspect of it when I was hitting my major low. I then I started empowering myself, started self-educating food and health, and requested to go off of my medication. As somebody who has gone through mental illness, I know how much that medication was needed at the time to stabilize me. However, the answer from that doctor was they would no longer treat me if I would not go the protocol that they were giving me.
Sure.
So we're talking about, this was 20 years ago. Yep. We're talking about mental health. And when you have doctors who are not in alignment with other philosophies out there, we're now dealing with somebody almost as if it's a life or death situation. So how do you empower somebody who is in that arena? Because I did it myself. I mean, and I think that in the end, that's what it comes down to. You have to find that strength somehow within yourself to say, I own this, I'm empowered, and I'm going to go find the resources. What's the first step? Okay. Like, somebody out there is listening to you and they're feeling lost. They don't know what they have.
Sure.
What's the first step?
The first step is telling them it's not in your head. You listen to your gut. And you search and you search and search until you find the right practitioner, right? Because I have too many patients told it's in your head, it's depression, you need to cut your calories, you need to exercise more, when really there is something going on inside that is driving their inflammatory processes or their autoimmune disease or whatever, their mental illness, right? I understand you get a diagnosis, you need a pillar of support, that's fine, but then we still have to find the root cause.
Right.
So what I always do is make patients feel heard. How do you do that? You listen to them, you get a good history, and you say it's not in your head, you just haven't had the right testing to find out why. Let's do the right testing. And then step 2 is me in working with you, I will be your advocate for your health. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to align you with the right practitioners. Because if I can connect with your healthcare team, guess it's not better for me, it's better for you, right? Well, I mean, it is better for me because my patient's going to have a better outcome.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's let's align you with the right doctors based on what you're looking for. So one motto that I've had for 10, 11 years is I'm not trying to turn atheists into believers. I'm not. My job is to help the people who want my help. The people who show up in front of me are not people who I have to convince need to change their diet. That's not the people I attract into my practice. The people who come into my practice are the ones who don't feel heard, that know they're not crazy, know there's a root cause, but nobody's looking for the root cause. Why? Because insurance doesn't cover it. Well, then you know what? It's cheaper to not use insurance, right? The right thyroid testing is $70. But if you bill it to insurance, it's $210, right? And then they're going to deny the antibodies. Why? Because there's no medication for Hashimoto's. There's none. So your insurance isn't going to pay for a test to give you a diagnosis for which there is no treatment. So what do you do to lower thyroid antibodies? You change your diet, you cut out gluten, you put in some of the right nutrition, such as selenium, which you can get from Brazil nuts. Yep. And the next step is you figure out what is driving your Hashimoto's, such as hormones, dysbiosis, leaky gut, or something of that nature. And there is one thing I do want to mention about Hashimoto's that's really tricky, and it's people who have an infectious disease that triggered their Hashimoto's, such as Epstein-Barr virus, Lyme disease, or mold toxicity. Those are the toughest cases to work with. And what makes them even tougher is here in St. Louis, I don't have any functional medicine practitioners to connect them to.
And you have tons of mold, Lyme diseases all over.
Right. So we have none. Like to connect a patient with somebody who is trained in functional medicine and treating Lyme disease, I have to send them to Kansas City. Wow. To connect somebody with a practitioner who specializes in mold toxicity, I have to send them to Chicago.
Really?
And that's sad. That's sad. So us as functional medicine practitioners, we need to step up because infectious disease is all around us.
It's interesting because I didn't know it. We had these groups of women. We were doing a cooking class and they kept going, I'm a limey, I'm a limey, I'm a limey. I had no idea what exactly do you mean I'm a limey. And Lyme's disease. And
it's a very big problem. And that's the hardest people to treat. Now, thankfully, the people whose Hashimoto's is driven by dysbiosis, leaky gut, hormonal imbalance, poor detox pathways, gene mutations, that's what I do all day, every day. It's what I see every day. With that said, those people who have that underlying infectious disease, it's tough. Their journey is going to be harder and it's going to be different. And those are people who may need to follow a diet like autoimmune paleo more closely because they're so much sicker going into it.
So I guess that's probably where we're different from you, and we're somewhat, I think we see before, after, and in the middle of your clients. We'll see people that are self-educated.
Right.
They come into us as a whole food or, a healthy restaurant, but they don't really know what's going on. And then we'll see people that are your clients, that they're very specific and very knowledgeable. And then we'll see people that are on they're, I don't want to say cured or whatever, but they're on a more healthy path and wanting to stay there.
Sure. In remission, essentially.
But they sure as hell don't want to go back.
Exactly. They're in maintenance mode. Right. It's kind of like we've cleared all this up, now it's maintenance.
We are trying to bridge that, I don't even know, but somehow get it all together, because we have people that come in and you almost know by the way they order or how they talk that they really don't know what the hell they're saying.
Right.
Well, and that's part of what
they're guessing.
Yeah.
They're guessing.
Trying.
Well, and that's that has a lot to do with why the find your inner flavor piece came into play with SymBowl, and that is SymBowl as a restaurant can serve the food with integrity and can customize things specific to these dietary issues. However, the find your inner flavor got pushed into play because we're going, there's a lot of people still don't have a lot of knowledge, and we don't have a lot of the knowledge.
I'm a cook.
So we were like sitting there going, we need to find the experts out there so that we can better educate ourselves. I can't teach my entire staff, but with a podcast, with a YouTube channel, all that, we can empower other people to be better informed and better educated, to learn how to ask the right questions for themselves. Because just like you said with your own practice, you could only teach one person at a time.
Well, and that's what's driven me to do things like, I mean, I realize you started, as a restaurant or as a chef, and you've had to self-educate yourself just as much, if not more than functional medicine practitioners. And I completely, sympathize and empathize for people who are afraid to ask their doctors questions. That breaks my heart, because what's happening is they're bringing healthcare needs to you guys.
They do.
Right? And it's not fair.
And we're
not fair to the patient.
I don't have a...
I know. Yeah. You know what? But we have to investigate. We have to ask questions, and we shouldn't be with doctors that we're afraid to ask a question to.
Right.
That's just not fair.
I don't even know if they're afraid, but it's almost like in the moment they don't know
what it is. I don't think that that's what it is. I really think... I think that there has always been a need for that middle person, and I think that's kind of how we're starting to view ourselves as that middle person that says, because here's the thing, we're not doctors, we're not completely informed and knowledgeable, we don't have all of that education.
We could print off some cool thing to put on our wall, but I don't know if it would hold up in court.
And we're also not... Neither one of us, minus Greg's diabetes, neither one of us have life-threatening ailments because of food. But we see all of these struggles that are happening. So we feel like we come from this really good balance of how can we help by asking. We are really the customers that we're connecting to, because we don't know the answers. So we're seeking out all those professionals and saying, okay, these are the people coming in.
Sure.
We don't know that.
Okay, why are we getting all this asked all of a sudden? And that was like the autoimmune, the Hashimoto's. And we've really, probably in the last 2 years, we've really geared a lot of our recipes and just our technique to, okay, how can we accomplish and serve our customers? Because at the end of the day, we need to make tasty food that people want to actually eat.
Well, and that is the thing. A lot of times healthy is, in many people's minds,
bird food.
Not good tasting.
It used to not be good tasting.
And it was.
Right? It did. I went into health food stores when I was a teenager, and everything was horrible. But this is 20 years ago. Like anything, it's come a long way.
Yeah.
And guess what? At the end of the day, you're right. A fruit and a vegetable are still healthy. They're still healthy. But the more we manipulate that food, the less healthy it's going to be. The broccoli we eat today is not the broccoli our ancestors ate, right?
No, absolutely not.
So we can't we can't have this blanket approach to food, and we can't deny that food isn't making us sick. It is, but we've got to be conscious of what is good.
And the kicker is you got to eat.
You do have to eat, right?
You're gonna have to eat.
And you want it to taste good, and sometimes you want it to be fun. Food is love. Food is social. It brings people together.
Food is memories.
It is.
Food is family. Food is connection. Food is community.
Sure.
Food's life.
So let's go ahead and wrap this up. Let people know how they can get a hold of how they can get a hold of you, and any websites or resources.
Sure, absolutely. So my practice is Wellness Connection. Our website's connectwithwellness.com. There's me, another certified functional medicine practitioner, and we're looking to add another one.
So if you're looking.
I also do consultations virtually. I work with people all over the United States, as well as outside of the United States, as long as they speak English. So we've figured out our time zones to make that work from a food standpoint. My Cooking with Dr. Olivia Cooking with Dr. Olivia website has been there for years. We have a cookbook, menus, recipes, shopping lists. My nutritional products are Dr. Olivia Naturals. They're exclusively sold on Amazon. They're designed for inflammation. They're designed to support the basic nutrients that people need on a daily basis. So there's a lot of resources out there, but honestly, just keep following my info that I put out on Facebook. I'm constantly giving you guys resources and tools that aren't just me. They're connecting people to the tools and resources that they need to be well.
Perfect. Well, thank you. You're going to see Dr. Olivia with us more consistently. And we're proud to announce that I believe Wellness Connections is going to be a sponsor of the Find Your Inner Flavor podcast and brand moving forward. For us, Find Your Inner Flavor is about bringing and informing you, empowering you with the knowledge and the resources to get the foods in you and into your family that are more healthy, or the things that feed you specifically.
And you're not alone. You're not, this isn't you. This is natural life. This is what it's supposed to be, not life in a box. It's life in the world.
Yeah. And because of you, we are aligning and we are trying to bring more of those resources that are easier for you. The Find Your Inner Flavor sauce line is going to be coming into play. Currently, we are selling that out of our 3 locations. Our goal and our game plan is doing a crowdfund to be able to raise the capital so that we can shelf stabilize these for shipping purposes and to make it more resourceful to bring the Find Your Inner Flavor sauce line into your homes. Knowing that you're feeding your family exactly what it is that you would want to be feeding them if you had the time, the knowledge, and all of the expertise to make it taste the way that you wanted it to taste. So we're going to go ahead and close out this episode. Again, my name is Becky Schoenig, my partner, Gregory Owens. Thank you, Dr. Olivia, for joining us on this episode. You can find us at one of the SymBowl locations located in St. Charles, Chesterfield, or in Kirkwood, Missouri. And we want to thank Nationwide Processing for being the sponsor and allowing us to educate you.